Tonight, Israel orders civilians in the Gaza city of Rafah to get out. The city, once of refuge from war, now on its front lines. Hundreds of thousands with nowhere to flee.
I'm Ramy Inocencio in Jerusalem. Ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas are over for now, and Hamas claims another hostage is dead.
Plus, new reaction as a U.S. report takes aim at Israel's use of American weapons.
Free Palestine!
As campus protests flare again from Virginia to California. Also tonight, money matters. A federal judge's ruling could impact your next credit card bill, while mortgage rates reverse course. Plus, dazzling display. A rare solar storm lights up the sky in the north and south. Why the show's not over yet. Historic flyover. Dozens of aircraft wing it across the nation's most restricted airspace. And later, a salute to the top of the mark. San Francisco's legendary stop for U.S. service members and veterans celebrates 85 years.
Yes, we are very excited. We finally made it to 85.
This is the CBS Weekend News from Washington with Adriana Diaz.
Good evening. I'm Robert Costa, in for Adriana. Nationwide protests over the war in Gaza and President Biden's approach have inflamed dozens of colleges and universities, stoked tensions in the Democratic Party, and created new challenges for his re-election. Today, more pro-Palestinian protests as dozens of graduating students walked out of their commencement at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. Across the country, at the University of California at Berkeley, commencement began peacefully, but was disrupted by hundreds of protesters, most of them graduates in cap and gown. And tonight in Gaza, some 300,000 Palestinians in the city of Rafah are being forced to flee once again as the Israeli military prepares to target Hamas. CBS's Ramy Inocencio in Jerusalem leads us off.
Good evening. Israel's war cabinet has greenlit a new military advance on Gaza's southernmost city. Thousands of people in Rafah are right now evacuating to the coast, on top of the more than 100,000 that fled in the past week. Ramping up, the exodus from Rafah. Gazans heeded Israel's newest warning sent by texts and flyers from the sky. You are in a dangerous combat area. The IDF is about to operate with great force. We're leaving because of our fear and because of coercion, said this woman. We're leaving for the unknown, and there are no safe areas at all. All the areas it says are safe are unsafe. More are overflowing further up the coast, like Abu Mohammed al-Radi and his family. We came from Rafah and found no place to stay, he said. There isn't enough space for all the people. There is not enough space to hold the displaced people. What's left in Rafah is eerie abandonment, even journalists wrapping up their final stories. At the city's biggest hospital, a quiet acceptance more death is coming. Hamas is still fighting back with missiles and with media. This new video praises snipers shooting Israeli soldiers. Israel's army released its own, troops advancing through Gazan homes. But tonight, Hamas also released this video. A 51-year-old British hostage. They claim he died after an Israeli strike. Tonight, more protests across the country and outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Jerusalem. These protests have been happening for months. They're saying, bring the hostages home. Their blood is on the government's hands. Protests have swelled in recent weeks, calling for Netanyahu's ouster and for that ceasefire with Hamas. Until then, the desperate in Gaza are evacuating as fast as they can. And Hamas says ceasefire talks are back at square one, blaming Israel for rejecting its proposal last week. And Robert, the U.S. is trying to keep Israel and Hamas talking, if only virtually, to keep ceasefire hopes alive.
Ramy Inocencio in Jerusalem. Thanks. Here in Washington, the Biden administration has been working urgently for weeks to stave off a full-scale Israeli invasion of Rafah. At the same time, it's walking a diplomatic tightrope after releasing a critical report on Israeli use of American weapons in the conflict. CBS's Natalie Brand is at the White House with the latest.
Good evening, Robert. This nearly 50-page report delivered to Congress is critical of Israel, but also inconclusive, adding to the frustration from the right and left. Republicans accuse the report of providing political cover to the president with his supporters. Democrats say it ducks the critical question at hand after the State Department said given Israel's significant reliance on U.S.-made defense articles, it's reasonable to assess that weapons may have been used by Israel's military in instances, quote, inconsistent with international law, but says it doesn't have complete information to verify.
It sends a muddled message because it's inconclusive.
The document comes the same week the president warned Israel that the U.S. will not supply offensive weapons for a large-scale military operation in Rafah. Already, the White House has paused the shipment of 3,500 bombs, including 2,000-pound aerial weapons. The White House is worried about the impact they could have in dense urban settings.
If Israel is serious about doing a precise targeted counterterrorism operation that can take out Hamas battalions but not cause undue civilian harm, you really don't need munitions of that size anyway.
But the administration's move has intensified divisions on Capitol Hill.
I think the president's doing the right thing.
This is terrible policy, and it's bad for the United States.
Responding to Republican criticism, the White House says the president is still standing with Israel as they fight Hamas, but also making clear how Israel defends itself matters. The administration saying it does not want to see any more civilians killed. Robert?
Natalie Brand, thanks. Now to a setback for the Biden administration in court. A federal judge in Texas has blocked a plan to try and limit credit card late fees. The cap was supposed to go in effect next week. CBS's Elise Preston is on the Money Watch tonight. Elise.
Robert, credit card users looking for relief from late fees won't get it anytime soon after a federal judge sided with banks and businesses to freeze the rule from going into effect.
The Biden administration's rule to cap late fees for credit card payments at $8 is now temporarily on hold. A federal judge in Texas granted an injunction at the request of business and banking organizations. Late fees on bills generate an estimated $10 billion annually for credit card companies. The average penalty is a whopping $32 a month. This case could go all the way to the Supreme Court. Mortgage rates fell for the first time in 5 weeks. The average rate for a 30-year fixed loan is at 7.09%, down from 7.22 last week. Still not enough for some homeowners.
Why sell and pay higher interest on a new home?
Many house hunters are also sitting on the sidelines due to higher prices and low inventory.
Hello, may I have someone?
Some consumers are fed up with fast food. Several chains, including McDonald's and Starbucks, are seeing a drop in sales as their prices climb higher. McDonald's prices doubled since 2014, according to Finance Buzz, while Starbucks lovers are shelling out nearly 40% more compared to a decade ago.
Labor costs are partly driving higher prices at the nation's most popular fast food joints. Nearly half of states raised minimum wage for fast food workers this year. Robert?
Elise Preston, thank you. Now to the huge solar storm hitting the Earth's atmosphere. It's millions of miles away, but the eruptions on the sun are bringing the northern lights to regions that rarely see them all over the world. But if you miss this magical phenomena, you might get lucky tonight. CBS's Michael George in New York has his eyes on the sky. Michael.
Well, Robert, quite a show last night, and it's not over yet. But as beautiful as the northern lights are, with a solar storm this large, it has the power to affect things here on Earth, from the power grid to the GPS on your phone.
Oh my God, I was not expecting this.
Breathtaking, otherworldly images from Canada, Ukraine, Switzerland, and England. And across much of the U.S., people witness streaks of pink and purple and green as far south as Florida.
Wow.
Sean Dahl, senior space weather forecaster for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, explains what we're seeing in the skies.
The aurora is when we get energized particles that have left the sun in more quantities than usual, and they interact with Earth's magnetic barrier.
Astrophysicist Noor Rawafi says this is the biggest geomagnetic storm in more than 20 years.
This one is pretty large. I think it's pretty extreme.
It's so large, it can temporarily disrupt satellites we rely on for communication and navigation, like GPS. Elon Musk's Starlink satellites are reporting degraded service.
Most of us have GPS on our phones. Is that something that could potentially be disrupted?
Yes, it could, because most of our phones are single-frequency GPS systems.
Aurora Borealis can even impact our power grid and cause blackouts, but utility companies took precautions.
It seems this time around certain steps were taken.
Now, if you didn't get a chance to see Aurora last night, you still have one more shot tonight. Now, it is weather dependent, but experts say your best shot is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Robert?
Michael, thank you. Today, the woman who started the campaign that led to the creation of Juneteenth as a federal holiday was honored at Southern Methodist University. Opal Lee was awarded an honorary doctorate recognizing her life of activism. Juneteenth marks the day when 2,000 Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas, to announce to the more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state that they were finally free. Today, the presidential campaign carried on as former President Trump takes a break from his criminal trial to hit the shore, rallying thousands of supporters gathered in Wildwood, New Jersey. As for the Biden campaign, it has recently been working to rally its core voters, too. CBS's Torian Small reports on how Biden's team is ensuring black men especially are enthusiastic.
Black voters helped swing Georgia for Joe Biden in 2020, but their support appears to be softening.
I mean, I guess it's the best we got.
I think my vote's the same, but it's less enthusiastic.
Oh, we're actually letting people know about the election coming up.
And grassroots organizers are seeing signs black men are slow to return to his fold.
That young black men are more likely to say that they will vote for Trump. But what I am most concerned about this year is that about 30% were still undecided at the time of our poll.
Now 6 months out, the Biden campaign is retooling its messaging to those unenthused voters.
It's why we're running organizing pilots last year in cities like Milwaukee, targeted directly towards black men. We're now at a moment in time right now in April where we're scaling up those operations in all of our battleground states.
Republicans are focused on peeling black men away from Biden's base just without the infrastructure it had in previous cycles. For example, this now shuttered office space right outside Atlanta used to be the RNC's Black American Community Center. Without it, they're leaning on local conservative groups like the Georgia Black Republican Council for outreach.
We've done black conservative summits, we've done barbershop political forums, we bring government to the people in the local communities where they can ask direct questions and get direct answers.
Their pitch? Mentorship from generations of Republican black men without the national party.
Do you think Republicans are doing enough outreach in black communities?
We can do a better job. We have an opportunity to get a message out, and we're doing everything that we can to take advantage of that opportunity.
Biden is still expected to pick up the majority of votes from black men in the Peach State, but with fewer than 12,000 votes here making the difference in 2020, his bid can't afford too many of them staying home in November. Torian Small, CBS News, Atlanta.
Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, For the Birds, how this Florida ER is helping victims of the state's overcrowding. Eurovision final. After the protest, the spectacle takes over with millions watching worldwide. Later, landmark celebration. We visit the top of the mark. In always growing Florida, wildlife native to the state is getting hurt by humans who mostly are not. CBS's Christian Benavidez in Miami introduces us to an organization that's trying to bring things back into balance.
We really need to make sure that he can paddle appropriately with both feet.
At the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station in Miami, Renata Schneider is the emergency veterinarian on duty.
We're doing surgeries, we're doing EKG monitoring on our patients, we're using appropriate pain medications, we're cautiously using antibiotics.
Founded in 1980, the Seabird Station functions as an ER for local wildlife.
Is it an injured animal?
Lately, it's gotten busier.
We had our highest numbers in 2020, 2021. This year has been a very busy year. I don't know if we're going to break those numbers.
Staff here says South Florida has an invasive species problem, a growing human population that presents challenges to the native animals. Yaritza Acosta is in charge of rehabilitation. She's worked here for 12 years.
With more people, more buildings going up, we see a lot more hit by cars or birds flying into windows or buildings.
Then there's the seabirds with fish hook line injuries or that have swallowed plastic waste.
The pelicans in this cage have life-altering injuries, including this guy, that makes them ineligible for release. So the harbor station cares for them. Hey, buddy.
They become permanent residents at the Wildlife Center, so-called ambassadors, a public face to the seabird station during what Schneider says is a critical time.
South Florida is in trouble right now. We keep building, we keep destroying habitat. Without our work, how are these pelicans and gulls supposed to continue to thrive?
For most of the birds that get treated, this is the goal. After 55 days of treatment for botulism and an eye infection, this brown pelican was successfully released back into the wild.
Some people will make the argument, well, they would just die and leave them be in the wild. However, we don't buy into that. Most of the injuries that we see are caused by us. We have to correct the balance.
A balancing act to help us coexist responsibly with native wildlife. Cristian Benavides, CBS News, Miami.
Still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, why vintage planes today filled the secure skies above Washington, D.C. It's been 50 years since Waterloo shot ABBA to superstardom after winning the Eurovision Song Contest. Tonight, this year's competition is being held in Sweden, but overshadowed by the war in Gaza. A young Israeli singer is among the favorites to win, but her participation has drawn loud protests to the Swedish city where it's taking place. Competitors from 24 nations are performing, a spectacle watched by an estimated 180 million viewers worldwide. Here in Washington, D.C. today, the heavily guarded skies above the nation's capital were filled with vintage planes. Nearly 60 of them, some from as early as 1939, flew above the Potomac River in a celebration of 85 years of general aviation in the United States. It's the first time since 9/11 that general aviation planes have been allowed to fly over the National Mall. 11 federal agencies had to give their approval. Next on the CBS Weekend News, landmark celebration. Why this may be the best place to enjoy the beauty of the city by the bay. Tonight, a San Francisco landmark is celebrating 85 years of service and sweeping views of one of the country's most beautiful cities. In 1944, Time magazine wrote that up to 30,000 soldiers and sailors came up the elevator every month for a final drink on American soil before shipping out to war. In our weekend journal, CBS's Juliette Goodrich takes us to the top of the mark.
High atop Nob Hill, inside the Mark Hopkins Hotel, take the elevator all the way up, and on this night only, you'll travel back in time. 85 years?
Yes, we are very excited. We finally made it to 85, starting way back in May of 1939.
The top of the Mark, the Bay Area's most famous cocktail lounge, opened 85 years ago. It was an instant sensation. During the Second World War, the top of the Mark was a favorite spot for Pacific-bound military to share a toast before shipping out. As the warships left, wives and sweethearts gathered at this very corner known as the Weeper's Window.
And they would watch as they shipped out. And of course, there would be some weeping, there would be some tissues, a very emotional time.
Wow. It was also here that the tradition known as the squadron bottle began. Servicemen buy and leave a bottle with the bartender so the next member from the squadron could enjoy a free drink. Finish the bottle, you leave a new one behind.
The squadron bottle embodies and represents those bonds, that teamwork, that camaraderie that was forged at sea, as were the case.
Cheers to 75 years. Finally, on top of the mark, a bit of KPIX history. 75 years ago, KPIX began broadcasting from the attic above the famous bar, becoming the first TV station in Northern California. Cheers. Juliette Goodrich, CBS News, San Francisco.
That's the CBS Weekend News for this Saturday. First thing tomorrow, CBS Sunday Morning. Then it's Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan's guests include Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Reporting from Washington, I'm Robert Costa. Good night.